How Boston's colonial ports fueled the rise of a merchant aristocracy. Boston's transformation from a Puritan outpost to a thriving colonial metropolis was driven by its maritime economy. The city's natural harbor, strategic location, and entrepreneurial spirit fostered the growth of powerful merchant families whose wealth and influence shaped Boston's social, political, and economic landscape. This analysis traces the development of Boston's port, the rise of its maritime industries, and the emergence of a merchant aristocracy that would play a pivotal role in both colonial society and the American Revolution. 1. The foundations. Boston's harbor and early maritime economy, natural advantages, and early development. Boston Harbor, with its deep waters, sheltering islands, and access to multiple rivers, was recognized as one of the finest natural harbors in North America. Even before English settlement, it served as a regional trading hub for Native Americans. After Boston's founding in 1630, the harbor quickly became the city's economic engine, supporting fishing, shipping, and trade. By the mid-1600s, Boston Harbor was the primary entry point for imports to New England. The waterfront filled with wharves, docks, and warehouses, and by 1660, nearly all regional imports passed through Boston, fueling rapid urban growth too. Key maritime industries and trade routes, fishing and cod trade. Fishing, especially cod, was the backbone of Boston's early economy. Dried and salted cod was exported to Europe, the Caribbean, and other colonies, accounting for up to 35% of New England's exports in the late 18th century. This trade supported related industries such as boat building, rope making, and provisioning. Shipbuilding. Abundant local timber made Boston a center for shipbuilding. Shipyards produced vessels for fishing, trade, and whaling, not only for local use, but also for sale to other colonies in Europe. This industry further integrated Boston into Atlantic trade networks, whaling and ancillary trades. While whaling was more prominent in nearby ports, Boston merchants participated in the trade, exporting whale oil and baleen. The port's activity also supported sailmaking, chandlery, and marine railroads. The triangular and transatlantic trade. Boston was a key node in the Atlantic triangular trade. Ships carried fish, lumber, and provisions to the Caribbean and southern colonies, exchanging them for sugar, molasses, and rum, products of enslaved labor. Some Boston merchants also participated in the slave trade, exchanging goods for enslaved Africans. Boston's ships sailed to Britain and continental Europe, exporting colonial products and importing manufactured goods, textiles, and luxury items. The export of dried cod to Catholic countries in southern Europe was especially lucrative. 3. The rise of the merchant aristocracy, accumulation of wealth and social status. The wealth generated by maritime industries allowed a small number of families to rise to the top of Boston society. These merchants invested in land, ships, and urban development, and their fortunes enabled them to live in grand homes, sponsor public works, and participate in cultural and religious institutions. By the 18th century, Boston's social hierarchy was clearly defined, with wealthy merchants and professionals at the top. These individuals formed the city's upper class, often referred to as the Boston Brahmins. In later periods, political power and civic leadership. Merchant wealth translated directly into political authority. After 1700, men of wealth and property began to replace religious leaders as the primary force in city life. Merchants held public office, served as selectmen, and influenced the administration of the city, including the regulation of trade and urban development. Their economic interests often shaped local policies, especially those related to commerce, taxation, and relations with British authorities. Merchant families formed tight-knit social networks, intermarrying and collaborating in business ventures, reinforcing their dominance in both economic and political spheres. 4. Prominent merchant families and their ventures. The Faneuil family, Peter Faneuil, of French Huguenot descent, became one of Boston's wealthiest merchants, inheriting a vast business network. The Faneuils were deeply involved in transatlantic trade, dealing in fabrics, pottery, manufactured items, and staple goods like molasses, rum, sugar, and cocoa. Peter Faneuil's business also included direct and indirect involvement in the slave trade. The Hancock family, Thomas Hancock, established a successful mercantile business, importing and exporting textiles, hardware, and foodstuffs, and engaging in privateering and shipping. John Hancock expanded the family business, becoming one of New England's wealthiest men and a key figure in the American Revolution. The Adams, Amory, Appleton, Boylston, and Bradley families. These families, along with others like the Cabot, Lowell, Forbes, Shaw, Crowninshield, and Saltonstall families, made their fortunes in trade, shipping, and later, banking and manufacturing. Their business ventures included the China trade, whaling, and large-scale import-export operations. Women in commerce. Women also played a role as merchants, running shops, boarding houses, and engaging in trade, especially as widows or in the absence of male relatives. 5. The merchant elite and British authorities. Early cooperation and growing tensions initially. Boston's merchants benefited from the British Empire's mercantilist system, which provided access to British markets and protection for shipping. However, as British trade regulations and taxes, for example, the Navigation Acts, Sugar Act, Stamp Act, Townshend Acts, tightened, merchants increasingly resented imperial interference. Boston's merchants frequently engaged in smuggling and illicit trade to evade British restrictions. As their economic power grew, so did their political ambitions and willingness to challenge British authority leadership in resistance and revolution. Prominent merchants like John Hancock and Samuel Adams became leaders of the resistance, using their wealth and networks to fund and organize opposition to British rule. The Boston Tea Party, for example, was a direct response to the Tea Act, which threatened the interests of local merchants by granting the East India Company a monopoly. The merchant elite's grievances over trade restrictions and loss of autonomy became central to the broader colonial movement for independence, making them key architects of the American Revolution. 6. The legacy from colonial port to revolutionary powerhouse. Boston's merchant aristocracy was at the heart of the city's transformation from a prosperous colonial port to a hotbed of revolutionary activity. Their economic interests, social influence, and political leadership were critical in mobilizing resistance, shaping public opinion, and ultimately driving the colonies toward independence. The interplay between their pursuit of self-interest and their commitment to colonial rights made them both pragmatic and revolutionary, ensuring their lasting impact on the course of American history. Conclusion. Boston's colonial ports were the crucible in which a merchant aristocracy was forged. The city's maritime economy, anchored by fishing, shipbuilding, and transatlantic trade, created unprecedented wealth and opportunity. Powerful merchant families rose to prominence, shaping Boston's social hierarchy, civic institutions, and political destiny. Their leadership and resources not only fueled the city's growth, but also positioned Boston at the forefront of the American Revolution, leaving a legacy that endures in the city's identity and in the nation's history.